54 football-playing nations, 23 World Cup tournaments, 100 years of trying, not a single World Cup. This isn't the story of why Africa couldn't win the World Cup. It's the story of why it will never win one. Name the greatest players of the last 30 years. Didier Drogba, Samuel Eto'o, Yaya Touré, Sadio Mané, Mohamed Salah. Players who dominated the best clubs on earth. Players who won Champions Leagues, league titles, golden boots. Africa doesn't have a talent deficit. What Africa has is something harder to name and much harder to fix. Look at who actually wins World Cups, not who should win, who does. Spain, 2010. A nation that spent a decade rebuilding its academy system from the grassroots up. La Masia wasn't an accident. It was a philosophy, institutionalized over 20 years before a single trophy arrived. Germany, 2014. After the humiliation of Euro 2000, the German Football Association mandated youth development reform across every professional club. Mandatory, funded, structured. 14 years later, a World Cup. France, 1998-2018. The most talent-rich nation in Europe, because it built Clairefontaine, the world's most rigorous youth academy, specifically to harvest talent from its diverse population and give it a system to operate within. Argentina, 2022. Not their most talented generation, their most tactically flexible. With a manager who understood that Messi needed a structure around him, not a stage for him. Every winner, every single one, reveals something. Stars and systems. Not stars instead of systems. The trophy doesn't go to the most gifted room, it goes to the most organized one. Here is what the story usually skips. Cameroon, 1990. Cameroon in 1990 were not just a surprise story. They were a heartbeat away from becoming history. In the quarter-final against England, they had already forced the game into chaos, equalized from the spot, then even gone ahead. For a few electric minutes, the first African team in a World Cup semi-final looked possible. Then came the penalty that changed everything. England got their equalizer, Cameroon were dragged into extra time, and a second Lineker penalty finally ended the run at 3-2. The match still feels tragic in football memory. Cameroon did not merely get eliminated, they lived inside the possibility of a greater history for a few minutes, and then it slipped away. Senegal, 2002. Senegal were one golden goal away from turning a famous run into a truly historic one. They had already shocked the world by beating defending champions France, then pushed all the way into the quarterfinals before Turkey ended the story with İlhan Mansız's golden goal in extra time, a rule that no longer exists. Ghana, 2010. Ghana in 2010 is one of those World Cup stories where history feels like it was within arm's reach. They were seconds away from becoming the first African team to reach a World Cup semi-final, but in the chaos of extra time against Uruguay, Luis Suarez's handball stopped a goal on the line, Suarez was sent off, and then Asamoah Gyan hit the penalty bar. What makes it so brutal is the sequence. Ghana had done the hard part. They had the momentum, the chance, and the entire continent behind them. Then, one illegal act changed the path of the match, and one missed penalty turned a historic opportunity into heartbreak. These are not the records of a continent that cannot compete. These are the records of a continent that keeps arriving at the door and finding it locked. So why can't it open it? Jonathan Wilson, in Inverting the Pyramid, makes an argument that cuts clean through romantic football mythology. Systems follow players, not the other way around. Football tactics don't evolve because coaches are clever. They evolve because an extraordinary player arrives and forces everyone to reorganize around them. But here's what Wilson's framework implies, and what Africa forces us to confront. What happens when the player exists, but the system never comes? What happens when Mané spends his developmental years moving between academies in 3 different countries? When Eto'o is exported at 15 because no domestic structure can contain him? When the federation that should build around its best player is instead consumed by internal politics and underfunding? You get individual brilliance. Brilliant precisely because it survived without support. But you don't get a team. And the World Cup is not won by individuals. We are at the 2026 World Cup, the most expanded, most watched, most complicated in history, and the game has changed again. Arrigo Sacchi's pressing revolution, Pep Guardiola's high defensive line, Jurgen Klopp's gegenpressing, positional play, half-space exploitation, the goalkeeper as the first attacker. Modern football is not a game of moments anymore. It is a game of systems executing moments. Talent still matters. You still need the player who can unlock a door no system predicted. But talent without structure now gets eaten alive in the group stage, which means the question for 2026 isn't simply, does Africa have good enough players? Africa clearly does. The question is, has football become too complex for talent alone to win? And if the answer is yes, what does that mean for every nation still trying to compete on the strength of its individuals? Here is what I believe. The World Cup is the only trophy you cannot win with talent alone. Every other trophy can be bought, borrowed, or assembled across a summer transfer window. The World Cup cannot. It requires a national program, a federation that functions, an academy pipeline that produces players who already know how to play together before the tournament begins. A manager who has continuity, not a political appointment 6 months before kickoff. A culture where football is taught, not just played. It requires, in other words, a football ecosystem. And Africa's greatest opponent has never been Europe. It has never been South America. It has been the absence of that ecosystem. The gap between the talent the continent produces and the infrastructure it builds around it. Senegal is closer than they've ever been. Morocco proved in 2022 what organization and belief can do. Ghana has the pipeline. Nigeria has the history. The window is not closed. But here's the question that lingers. Can a nation or a continent win its greatest prize before it builds a culture that outlives its greatest players? That question doesn't just apply to Africa. It applies to every institution that mistakes having exceptional people for being an exceptional system. Football just makes it visible every 4 years in front of 4 billion people. The game doesn't lie.